so inspiring to see how this is really, disrupting and possibly disrupting. I asked Benjamin, and we can probably say more about this or have more questions after this presentation. Well, in 5 or 10 years, what happens to the big players? So we'll see. But very, very inspiring to see how it impacts global health and how you can actually, have make a real difference to the world in terms of global health issues. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move to our second kind of general topic in this series of our speakers, which is listening to two of our speakers from large companies. So this was, we had quite a very interesting panel, quite amazing serial entrepreneurs and bringing new technologies, shifting the paradigm. Now we're going to hear two of our speakers share about shifting the paradigm and revolutionizing from the inside, and how they have also turned around, the business model and the ways of working to really impact their organization and more widely the patients and the people around them. Don't have my glasses, so let me see.
Do you need some innovation?
Yeah, well, people keep telling me I need the bifocals, but I haven't gone to that yet. So, who would like to, invent something a little easier? So, for our next speaker, I will be welcoming Colleen Schuller, who's the head of Global Selling Excellence at GSK. Colleen is responsible to help build the best-in-class sales organization for GSK globally. Colleen has been with GSK for 17 years in various sales and marketing roles, mostly in the U.S. up until this role 2 years ago. 2 years ago. The most significant being leading the national sales team of 800 sales professionals in the U.S. Colleen loves to travel and discover new and interesting people and places. And she has set herself a personal goal, being curious and discovering, to reach 50 countries by the end of the year with, only 3 to go, so that should probably be possible. So we're now shifting. Colleen will talk to us about the need to reinvent operating models to be a match for stakeholder expectations. Professor Barlow talked about the whole environment that's changing, the expectations from stakeholders, what's at stake in terms of the trust in organizations also. And this is what we're going to hear about with Colleen's presentation. Please join me in welcoming Colleen.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for that. All right, so I don't have my doctorate, and I haven't been to 50 countries yet. I do know one line in French. So, bonjour, je m'appelle Colleen. Yes, that's all I know, and that was from the 6th grade back in the U.S. So happy to be here today on behalf of GSK and talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, which is innovation, driving organizational change, and doing so through winning the hearts and minds of the sales organization. So I'd like to start by thinking about innovation and really where it starts. And if you think about change and any type of innovation or new thinking, that change will always start with self. Because if you can't, for those who cannot change their minds, you cannot change anything. And what I'd like to share with you today is a bit about breaking this paradigm or this notion that traditional pharma and operating models and the old way or former way of doing business has to be the way forward. And I'm privileged enough to work for GSK for 17 years and work under the leadership of a CEO, Andrew Whitty, who was one of the most innovative, one of the most bold, courageous leaders that I've ever seen. And he told me a story one time that when he became CEO, that he actually looked at himself in the mirror one day and said, you know what, I want to be a different type of CEO, and I'm going to find a way to run a successful business, delivering for patients, delivering for customers, delivering for our employees, and delivering for shareholders, but to do so in a different way. And I actually believe that I can change the world. And I'll get to that at the end in terms of what happened there. So why did Sir Andrew Whitty really have that business challenge to say, what can be different here? And as you think about what was happening in society, that trust was being eroded over and over from pharmaceutical companies. You all saw the statistics that pharma companies in terms of trust are rated with big tobacco in many cases, and that erosion was continuing. Customers weren't always trusting pharmaceutical companies. Doors were closing in terms of access. Society was losing trust. There were more and more lawsuits and litigation. One, of course, GSK was involved in, one of the largest ever, in terms of unlawful promotion of our medicines for the wrong patients. And this quote really stuck with me in terms of why traditional sales models really need to be rethought and revised. And that is, and I'm going to read this because I think it's very powerful. It's bad for patients when sales reps are paid based on the number of drugs that they sell. Sales targets make sense in a retail store. They make sense at a car dealership. They don't make sense in hospitals. In fact, it's a dangerous trend. So I'd like to talk now about the changes. So what exactly did we do to really revolutionize our operating model? And we did this really, again, to drive trust with society, with our customers, with patients and employees. Because we believe as an organization that if we can earn trust, then that actually is a sustainable long-term competitive advantage, and that it will lead to improved business results. So that was what we were out to accomplish. So what exactly did GSK do over the last number of years, beginning in 2012 in the US? So number one, and probably the most controversial change that we made, is removal of individual sales targets. And we have a sales force of 19,000 across the globe. So we removed individual sales targets for our customer-facing sales professionals and also for first-line sales leaders across the globe, beginning in the US. We ended direct sponsorship for HCPs to attend medical conferences. So we still support medical education, but we do so through grants versus sending individual customers to medical conferences and paying for their travel and expenses. Number three, we ended payments to HCPs to speak on our behalf, and instead we beefed up our internal medical capability so that we still deliver promotional meetings, medical education, but we do so through our own staff versus paying customers where it could be a perceived conflict of interest. And lastly, we're modernizing our approach to customer engagement through digital channels and reaching customers in new and different ways. And this is not taking away from the sales force, but really it's supplementing the efforts of our sales force. So if we look at what was taken away, we had to really think about then how did we need to fill this bucket, because we still have a sales force 19,000 strong, and their job was still to accelerate growth for the organization, but to do so by selling our medicines and vaccines the right way for the right patients. So we really had to take a look at different motivation and belief systems and think, how do we motivate our sales force in the absence of sales targets? What can we do as opposed to extrinsic motivation to really tap into the fire and ignite those intrinsic motivators? So you see, and many of you are very familiar with this, different forms of motivation that we tapped into. Obviously, autonomy, mastery, and purpose is one. Another area in terms of motivation and belief system that is kind of more cutting edge and new evidence is something called the Salesperson's Secret Code, and I was privileged to be part of this body of research. And this is an organization that looked at the differences between high-performing sales professionals and low-performing sales professionals. In fact, 300 of the top, 300 of the bottom, across many different companies and across many different industries, not just pharma. And what the evidence showed is that there are 5 distinct belief systems that are different between high-performing sales professionals and low-performing. And these are the 5: a sense of fulfillment, a sense of control, resilience, how they go about influencing customers, and their style of communication. So again, this book will be published in the next couple of months. But so I really took a look at what is all the evidence and how can GSK ensure that we're looking at intrinsic motivators and what really drives, what are the belief systems and behaviors that drive high-performing sales professionals, and how do we pull all this together to say, what do we need to do to recruit differently at GSK because our model is very different, and how do we tap into those intrinsic motivators? And lastly, if you think about, quite simply, to tap into the motivation of your sales force, oftentimes it's simply a leader, a line leader that can sit down and really understand what motivates you, what are your goals, and how do they help find that intersection between where you can deliver value and your personal goals and where you need to contribute for the organization. I won't go into too much here. We are looking at what will drive good selling outcomes across our sales force that's 19,000 strong. And obviously there's some fundamentals here. You need very capable first-line sales leaders who are very capable at coaching and leading and tapping into those internal drivers. You need obviously quantity and quality of coaching, but also within sales leader capabilities, we really had to beef up the skills within change management in particular, and setting direction and inspiring, because the changes that we made in fundamentally changing our operating model required some very different sales leader capabilities that we had to strengthen across the globe. And then we're also looking at some other enablers, and one area that I'm particularly interested in right now is how do we tap into technology in new and different ways to build capability and build Salesforce engagement across the globe through virtual channels. And so we're piloting some new and different things of how you can get Salesforce engagement, how you can increase their knowledge, how you can improve selling skills in a remote fashion. And that's proven to be very, very promising based on some pilots we're doing in India. And another area that we really had to focus on as we made these fundamental changes, and I was a sales leader back in the US when we took away the sales targets, and I thought, oh my gosh, no way is this going to work. This is going to be very, very significant change and very hard to do, and it was. And so as a leader, you really had to find a way to simplify this equation. So what we focused on with the sales force is that actually there's a simple equation here to say that the right inputs or the competencies should lead to the right outputs or sales targets. And this equation has not changed. It's still there. What's different is that we now compensate our sales force based on the inputs or their knowledge, their selling skills, their ability to business plan and do analysis around their territory. So we just pay them now on the inputs as opposed to the outputs. But this equation has not changed. So results and lessons learned. So the big question is, well, how did this impact business performance? So I will say in the US, when we took away the sales targets, we did see a decline in performance. We over-engineered the compensation scheme. We did lose some of our high performers initially. But we saw after a couple of years that the performance started to improve once we could fix the model, make some improvements, and simplify it. But overall, I can share with you some results. So let's take 2016, for example. Group sales were up 6% at GSK. If you look at our new product launches in our new operating model, that our new product sales represent 24% of our overall sales, 4.5 billion pounds, which is more than any other pharma company. And also in terms of how we deliver medical education, for example, we had 68,000 healthcare providers attend our webinars from our internal medics, not paid HCPs. And when we asked them what was the quality of the medical education, 80% of them rated the quality of our internal medics to be superior or more than external other pharma companies who had paid speakers. But I think the number one most compelling proof point is by the time Andrew Whitty retired, which was just a few months ago, in 2016, GSK was rated the #1 company by Fortune for changing the world. And this was based on business performance, societal impact, and innovation. So I'm here to tell you that we do need to rethink our old ways of working, that building trust, taking away conflict of interest, can lead to successful business performance. We've seen it at GSK. Obviously, there's some lessons learned, and I can share these. I think it's probably better to share these during the Q&A, as we're a bit out of time. So thank you.